Welcome to the Digital Forester Podcast, where we talk to foresters about how they are using digital technologies in their day-to-day forestry work. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Forester Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Kerry Halligan. He's the GM of technology at the Woodland Solutions Group. Kerry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kevin.
So we were joking at the start. We haven't seen each other in a really, really long time. Like 2 days ago at the Foresters Forum in Coeur d'Alene there. But we were actually having a chuckle because as we were getting set up, I was like, Kerry, your camera looks like a little bit blurry. And your response to fix the solution was to
Simply unplug and replug.
So when in doubt, everyone, the reboot still works perfectly. Just unplug, replug, and magically everything works great. So
Yeah.
thanks for joining. I know we just saw each other a couple of days ago. Didn't have that much time to chat because again, at a conference, everyone's wheeling and dealing and chatting with people and connecting with old friends and new friends. But I'm really excited to have this conversation with you because again, like we've been around long enough, and in some respects, similar career patterns in terms of working in the mapping industry and then doing some really cool science and technology. But maybe to kick us off, maybe introduce us to why a PhD at University of California at Santa Barbara. Was that always part of the plan, or was this something that it was just a journey like some of us that like the ivory towers in academia? How did we end up there?
How did we end up there? That's a great question. It certainly wasn't a part of a plan or no plan that I knew about. Really, I would say it's a very organic evolution. I got a degree in forest ecology from Western Washington University in Bellingham, Washington. And after that, I spent about a decade in the field doing every manner of forest or vegetation field work, even some stints doing wildlife research. So I spent time working for the Forest Service and for Oregon State Forest Sciences Lab. I even went down to Costa Rica and spent about a year doing tropical forest ecology. Thought I was going to get into studying epiphytes and things like that. Ended up in Yellowstone, though, doing a combination of wildlife research and vegetation research. And I think the common theme through all of it is we would go out to a particular place in the woods or out in the sagebrush, and we'd take a ton of field measurements and just sometimes out there with calipers taking very detailed measurements, characterizing the vegetation structure, the species dynamics, the ecological aspects of it. But it was always a point, and we'd come back and have binders full of data or data loggers and databases, and we're filling it all up, but there were all these points on the landscape, and it was really hard to then write the report or the paper and weave it together into the big story. It was that context. How do you extrapolate from the data? And while I was in Yellowstone, there were a lot of people out there doing remote sensing work and flying all kinds of great sensors. It became where Yellowstone was like a test bed for new sensor technology because you could calibrate off these really cool geothermal features. Mammoth Hot Springs is bright and white, so it's great for calibrating optical remote sensing. And then there's all these thermal pools, so you could calibrate thermal sensors. And so we had access to all this great remote sensing data. So the opportunity came across that, hey, you could pursue this remote sensing, go get a master's and eventually a PhD. Really, the goal was to be able to take all those point measurements that we've been taking and all this really fine, detailed information, and now be able to use remote sensing to establish the patterns across the landscape, see where things are in common. You really could make maps that had meaning and notice where those anomalies were. So that was it for me, is how do we get from this really fine point-based information to landscape level analysis, which is what everybody was really, craving out of the science, but it's hard to do that with just the field data.
Yeah. And so where did that interest or passion maybe come from? Was this something, curated when you were a young boy or our parents, there's an influence, or was there a moment that you can trace back to this interest of forest ecology and fieldwork and measurements and that kind of pulled it all together?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think probably one influential thing from my past is I grew up in a family that had a sailboat, and we would spend a couple weeks every summer sailing, and we'd sail up into British Columbia, and so there was this ritual where every evening we'd be poring over the charts, planning out, hey, where do we want to go tomorrow? And my family always wanted to anchor out. So we would be, exploring out into these little, lesser known areas, finding bays and going up little channels. And so I think in a lot of ways, I always loved that, loved maps and loved that sense of exploration. And so, as I got older, that led to, doing hiking and backpacking and mountain climbing and oftentimes going off trail just to explore the landscape and navigate the terrain.
Yeah.
So with that came a love of nature and interest in biology and ecology. But then weaving that back into mapping really was the great part for me, studying GIS and remote sensing and getting to sort of, extend from those little points that you visit back to that map context, that sense of exploration.
Yeah, for sure. And so looking at your LinkedIn profile and the career, it looks like you spent a bit of time in the mapping space and with Sanborn. Maybe tell me more about what you were doing there and was it a transition point in the career, working for the mapping company and then moving full tilt into more the software technology on the forestry side? Or was it again something organic as you're doing that, your interest maybe just changed directions?
Yeah, yeah, great question. Well, when I was finishing up my PhD, I loved the work I was doing. And it was focused on GIS and remote sensing, but increasingly it was focused on software development. As you're well aware, if you want to do anything innovative in science, especially if you're doing it, early 2000s, you really have to be doing some sort of software development. And whether you're scripting something in R or Python, or whether you're writing full-blown server applications in Java or C Sharp, you really just have to be developing your own tools because that's where innovation happens. And so for me, I realized as I was doing my work, I ended up writing a software package called Viper Tools, which was a plug-in to the Envy application. And it was for doing sort of advanced hyperspectral analysis. We were doing multiple multiple end member spectral mixture analysis. See, I still can't even say that without um, hiccups. But anyhow, so that's what we were developing new software for that. And what I realized as I was developing those tools and helping my colleagues do their analysis of hyperspectral imagery and doing image fusion and things, that I really love developing the tools and helping other people be successful with those tools. And it dawned on me after a while that I was a little bit more of an engineer than a scientist. And I realized I didn't really want to stay in academia. And I was looking for something in the corporate world where people were really, seeking solutions, building out new capabilities, yet still tied in with, that love of remote sensing and advanced sensor technology and geospatial analysis. And so my major professor, Dar Roberts, was on the science advisory board for Sanborn Map Company. And so he said, I think you should come and talk to the folks at Sanborn. They're definitely interested in innovation. They're interested in some of the things you're doing. So I was able to connect with them, and they essentially carved out a position for me. And so I was the head of research and development there, and ended up leading the software development team. And we did certainly some of the things that I had been doing spectral analysis, vegetation mapping, and things like that. But they were also doing lots of really just cool, interesting, innovative things. So I worked a lot on developing new software for doing 3D modeling of urban areas. And how do you take the things coming out of the traditional CAD process of defining 3D shapes through stereo photos and all of that, but how do you now get imagery and street level textures applied to these images and build these immersive 3D urban models and things. And so yeah, we just did really interesting, fun work there. And so I was there from 2007 until I guess 2011 is when I left Sanborn.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And it always amazes me that it's often in business who we know. Sometimes that opens the doors for us
Oh,
into different situations. And that's why I always joke network, 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 whenever you
yeah.
do events, even if you meet one new cool person, like that's a success in my books. You just never know what that person can do for you going forward. So I'm dying to know because not everyone knows how to code or do software development, yet alone lead a team of needy, nerdy engineers quirky people. So how did that come about? Was that just how your brain works and you're able to pick up the coding or understand the semantics of the different languages and then apply it into the syntax? But how did that come about? Or was there some other angle, someone you knew or a parent that came from that space? But how did that skill set come about?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't have a computer science degree, and didn't do any formal training in it. It really came out of the need from the analysis perspective. Like I said, I had access to just amazing remote sensing data sets. We had LiDAR, we had airborne thermal data, we had ground penetrating radar, and I was being funded by all these great agencies, NASA and NGA, and so working with SAR radar people, but so much of it you were really just hamstrung by the tools that were available. So there were great platforms, and so I was using ArcGIS, I was using Envy, but really just couldn't do the types of analysis. And so I was really interested in machine learning and how do we take some of the things out of the machine learning community. Once again, I finished up my PhD in 2007, so we weren't calling it AI back then, but it was very similar, or maybe the starts of it. And so I was interested in all of that, but how could you apply that? And so there just wasn't the capabilities. You could do some things in the statistical packages. They had some of the models, and then the remote sensing GIS software had the mechanics, the pixel pushing, the ability to do analysis, but you couldn't combine those easily. And so you really just had to code it. And that was advice I got from my major professor, Darb Roberts at UC Santa Barbara. And he said, you're really going to, be limited on the types of analysis you can do until you can actually start coding it. And I took that to heart and said, okay, well, how do we make that happen? And so, I really, worked with this group of other grad students and said, hey, we can do this together. Let's lift each other up, and let's figure out how to do this development. And so we roped Dar, our major professor, to help us get started. And so he started doing these weekly, seminars with us, showing us the code that he was writing, and then we all just worked together and started developing these toolkits and sharing code. And like I said, at some point I realized that part of it was even more fun than the science, that engineering of actually solving problems, taking great ideas and models and things people were doing, but making them something that you could actually run in a routine way against image data sets, et cetera, to do the kinds of analysis. And yeah, I really just realized I loved that problem solving nature that you can only get through writing software applications.
For sure, 100%. And now I believe there's a shift to Mason, Bruce, and Gerard somewhere along the line. So maybe tell me what happened there in terms of the career journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So I switched to Mason, Bruce, and Gerard in 2011. President of Woodland Solutions Group, Jim Schriever, was a principal at Mason, Bruce, and Gerard, but he had been at Sanborn Map Company. And so when he joined Mason, Bruce, and Gerard, he was tasked with starting a geospatial line of business at Mason, Bruce, and Gerard. And so I was the first person he hired. And he said, well, hey, if we're going to grow this into a geospatial line of business as a new line of business within that organization, he wanted me to help him do that. So he and I had worked together at Sanborn, so he asked me to come and join the Mason Bruce team, and eventually we ended up getting a few other folks that we'd worked together with at Sanborn. Um, and that was great. That was really new to me. It's funny, but the forestry software was very new to me. In retrospect, it's kind of funny because as a part of my PhD work, I guess I wrote an inventory management system, and I guess I wrote a compiler, but I didn't know either of those words. I was collecting all this forestry data and, using GPS units and prisms and taking all these measurements. But I didn't know those software existed because I was coming at it from the vegetation science perspective, not forestry. And so I was, reading the general technical reports on biomass equations, just coding it up myself in a database so that I could do the analysis for my degree. And then I land at Mason, Bruce, and Gerard, and I say, oh, that's a thing. There is this class of software that is meant for managing inventory data and compiling volumes, et cetera. And so anyhow, so I was asked to help support those, and then obviously got a lot of interest in those and how we could, do better, how we could develop just more powerful systems, take advantage of the technology, and certainly weave in the geospatial part, which was sort of woefully absent from a lot of these inventory systems in the day.
Yeah, isn't it funny that you spend that many years doing a PhD and to come out of it to realize that your basic data collection tools, your compilers, things you had written, like it's actually worth something versus trying to solve climate change on your own or world hunger. It's just something like that you take for granted that actually has tremendous value. That's a side discussion probably around how to commercialize science out of universities there and why some people
Yeah.
fail. Maybe we're overthinking things. So I guess maybe the last step, I guess, as we do the career path is Woodland Solutions Group. Tell me more about that. And I believe it was a spinoff from MB&G, but then now you're also affiliated with another organization. So maybe bring us up to speed in terms of what happened there, and maybe why that spun off came, and who are the players now that are driving Woodland Solutions Group.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was at Mason Bruce for about 11 years and, really enjoyed my time there. Great group of people. Obviously, a very well-respected name in the forestry industry. And as I mentioned, I was really focused on the technology piece. How can we take these tools that people were using, which were fairly outdated, and really not taking advantage of the technology and the efficiencies that could be achieved with modern devices, enterprise GIS, enterprise web technology. And so we were very interested in that and solving problems that we just couldn't solve other ways via technology. With several projects I can remember where, somebody would come to us, hey, we need in a very short amount of time maps of this entire country or maps of this potential acquisition. And we would say, physically we can't do it. We don't have time to print the hard copy maps and get all of this, but we could give this to you as a digital data set and you could take it out tomorrow because we have the imagery. It's a matter of getting it into map books or things like that. That's going to take too much time. So, just over my time at Mason Bruce, we just continue to focus in on building out software solutions to meet, foresters' needs. But sometimes a software company's, business model and a forestry consulting firm's business model are just different. They're just different needs. And in software, you always have to be innovating. You always have to be investing. You always have to be out there spending the costs ahead of time so that you're ahead of the market. And that's a very different model than in the consulting world. So eventually we realized that it was better for us to go our separate ways. And so we did. And so in 2022, we formed Woodland Solutions Group. And so it's primarily myself with Jim Schriever, our president, and Janet Hoyt, who's the GM of operations. And so, we sort of heralded this new company, got it all off the ground, and we were, just fortunate enough to be able to keep our team with us. So for the most part, the geospatial services group from Mason Bruce and Gerard became Woodland Solutions Group. And so a lot of us have worked together for a long time. And so there's a great, sense of trust and a lot of just top-notch technical skill within our team. So yeah, so we've been doing that now for still under 2 years, but it's just been a great move. It's really allowed us to focus in on the things we want to focus in on, which is innovating and writing the best quality software we can, and really providing that full software services to our clients. But small businesses are hard. And there's challenges, and you end up spending a lot of time managing the business, and that you wish you were head down doing the technical piece or meeting with your clients. And so, there's an economy of scale there that's important. And so, last July we joined forces with DJA to try to take advantage of that. And so DJA is is an architecture and engineering firm, design firm out of Missoula, Montana. And so they've got, I think, maybe 120, 140 people. And so our group of, yeah, I think we were 18 at the time joining them. It's been great. It's been great to have some of those resources, and certainly in terms of managing the business and all the challenging things like healthcare and 401k and just, accounting and all of that. So it's great to be a part of a large organization, and they're just incredible group of people. They run a great business, and they've got all kinds of just skilled engineers and designers and all kinds of really exciting toys, drones and lidars and ground-based lidar systems and things. And so, still trying to figure out how we can best work together and take advantage of all of that. But it's a really nice kind of exciting evolution for the work we're doing.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And I guess
Yeah.
with them being based in Missoula, Montana, you folks haven't had to relocate. You've been able to stay, and I believe that you guys are based in the Portland area. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we're a 100% virtual
Ah,
company. Mason Bruce and Gerard was based out of Portland, so several of our folks were there in Portland. I'm based out of Portland, but just working out of a home office. And then, we have developers that are around the country, and Jim Shriver's in Colorado. In fact, the name Woodland Solutions Group comes from Woodland Park, Colorado, where he lives. Um, yeah, and so DJ&A is different in that sense that they do have physical offices. And they've got their main office in Missoula, and then offices in Vancouver, and in Denver. And so, we can take advantage of that and meet up with those folks and use those office spaces, but we're still all working out of home offices and virtual. And with the software development team, that's just fine. We work very well virtually. It's all source code repositories and meetings, and that's how we communicate, is via the code and working applications.
100%,
So
100%. So
yeah.
thanks for walking us through that your journey, your career, and really fascinating. I just see so many trends when I talk with digital foresters. There's just very fascinating trends and similarities that I pull out of the stories. So maybe we'll shift gears and get into some technology, and so that's where some folks listen, and maybe walk me through the Woodland Solutions Group software offerings, because most of them start with a mobile. I might say mobile, maybe it's mobile, depending potatoes. But we got mobile maps, we got mobile map crews, we got mobile map roads. Then we got inventory manager, and I think we have some CMS technology as well. But for those who may not be familiar with Woodland Solutions Group and what you offer, can you give us an overview of what it is you do and the SaaS software that you offer to the forest industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the high level, our main offering that's pertinent to foresters would be our inventory management system. And it really is composed of these two applications, MobileMap and Inventory Manager. And we started with MobileMap, and it really was just, a field application for cruising timber. We call it MobileMap because it is GIS based, so it's map centric. And so, that was really the piece that I saw surprisingly absent when I was looking at, when I joined Mason Bruce and Gerard and was looking at the systems people were collecting data with. It's inherently spatial data. It's GIS. It's real world locations. It stands that are mapped, across an ownership, and then point locations. And yet people were going out there with tabular data recorders and saying, I think I'm at plot center, and collecting information and not even recording where they were, let alone using a map to get there. And so with my background in software and GIS, that just didn't make any sense. And then when you throw in the remote sensing and that contextual information that people could have right there at their fingertips, I said, let's put these things together. And so, basically, as soon as Esri came out with their mobile software development kits, it was 2011, about the same time that Samsung was coming out with the Galaxy Tab, and then Google came out with the Google Nexus 7. And to me, just everything converged, right? We have decent, affordable Android devices. We have an enterprise GIS that now is a software development kit for mobile, and then we have the GIS services available. So now we can transfer data back and forth. And so that really was what kicked us off in a big way, developing a new solution. And so we released that at SAF in 2013. So we just had our 10th year anniversary of that. And we just started by saying, hey, look at what all this technology could do. You as a forester could take the same maps that you have in your map book, but you could take it out on this small device, and you can interactively query to see all your stand information. And as we started putting that in front of our foresters' hands, our clients started seeing that. Hey, could we get one of those built for our forest? And once that happened, why can't we collect data with it? Why can't we cruise timber with it? Why can't we check cruise timber with it? Why can't we do statistical analysis out in the field while we're check cruising timber? And it just continued to add upon itself. So that's MobileMap, and that basically does everything a forester should need to do out in the woods in terms of data collection, navigation, analysis, data quality control, et cetera. And then the companion to that is the web application InventoryManager. So it's a cloud-hosted web application. Basically does what foresters need before they go out in the field and what they need to do after coming back. So they can do their whole cruise design. They can do the cruise management in terms of assigning work to people, rebalancing, utilization, tracking projects, and then doing the full analysis, whether that means, doing a compilation or quantitative check cruise scoring, or whether they're outputting it out to a third-party system like FPS or FVS or T-Cruise. So we integrate with all of those systems and just try to bridge between what Esri does really well, which is providing a secure, scalable, powerful geospatial service framework, and what a forester needs to do, which is quick, easy access to data collection with very specific cruise specs, data models, et cetera, and trying to bridge the gap as well to the systems that people already love and use. People are very much invested in their analysis platforms, whether it's T-Cruise or FPS or FDS. You can't just change the numbers in people's inventory or say it's okay to calculate your carbon using this other tool. So, people are very invested in both their Esri technology as well as these analytic systems. And so, our philosophy is don't recreate the wheel. Let those systems do what they do really well, but try to bridge the gap between those. Just make it really easy for people to get data from their GIS out in the field, quickly and easily collect high quality data, get it back up into an enterprise secure data store, ArcGIS, and then feed that into whatever tools they want. And if it's our tools and they want to do the compilation right in InventoryManager, great, that works fine. If they don't and they want to go out to their existing analytics system, that's fantastic as well. So we really, when it comes to implementing this, whether that's for a state agency, a large, a TMO, or whether it's a small operation, a lot of it gets down to how do you want to do that merchandising? How are you going to do the compilation? What tools are you using now? Which ones do you want to replace? And which ones do you just want to make, easier to feed full of data and easier to take those results and store them?
Yeah, very, very cool. And you had mentioned, you'd been at this for, well, now over 10 years. And it struck me at the Foresters Forum in Coeur d'Alene. I think you were giving a demo where you're talking about, the calipers being sync with your technology, that you didn't even have to input the data. And that showed to me like a lot of thought in terms, and speaking with foresters. But along those lines, I'm dying to know, like, you're introducing this new technology to a group of people that generally are slower to adopt technology. I'm choosing my words carefully. Carrie's giggling on the video side. How did it go? And were there certain tactics or tricks that you had to use to maybe drag the forester to water, if you will, to get them to buy in? Or was it something that was just kind of organic? People are like, yeah, I get this, and yeah, let's go. Because if I remember your talk just last week, like, this is technology used across multiple states across the lower 48, as you mentioned, TMO's, REITs, a whole span of contractors, like it's widely adopted. But was it smooth sailings from the start, or were there some
No.
speed bumps?
No, and we really didn't have a vision of where this would end up when we started. Like I said, um, the the opportunity was there. There was a big gap between what was possible and what people were doing back in 2011 when I started at Mason Bruce and Gerard, and so it was clear that there was an opportunity to improve things for foresters, improve the data quality. So we started building these tools really to help us, you know, manage contracts, be efficient in the field, be effective, deal with the high cost of existing, Windows mobile devices, and the fact that some of those were getting a little bit old. And so, I'm always thinking about how innovation can happen and take advantage of, new trends in technology. So we just started applying that with the thought that, well, we could make things better for the people that we knew who wanted those. But we got pretty excited about it. So that's why we, did this workshop back in 2013 to say, hey, everybody, look at what's possible now. And, I would say we had some early adopters that really helped take it and make it a success. So, Bruce Ripley, and he certainly falls into that category. And he would give us all kinds of free consulting and see every, iteration of the application and say, well, I think you could improve it this way. If you did that, I think we could buy into this. And so there were certainly early adopters out there that gave us critical feedback, and folks that were, veterans in the industry who had cruised for decades and decades and said, listen, this isn't going to be practical until it does this or it works that way. And, the first iteration was not successful. It was a totally different technology. It wasn't fast enough. You couldn't enter in data fast enough to keep up with the way people were used to doing it. So, back to the drawing board, try the next thing. And then we got something that worked. But it was certainly slow in the beginning. And, I think the pushback we often got was, hey, nobody's going to go out there and cruise timber with a phone. That's just not going to happen. We're going to use paper and pencil because it's the way we've always done it. Or we maybe would use like a 5-pound brick, like a CMT or, something from, that was the only way that people thought about what field data collection systems look like. But over time that changed as people saw the power, and especially I think the mapping part of it really helped people embrace it, that they could go out there with a high resolution aerial image and a topo map and be able to zoom in and zoom out and really efficiently plan their day, navigate to plots, have it tell them when they're at the plot, so they're removing bias, just improving efficiency. And then the kicker, you get out of the woods, you get back to the office, and you just press upload. Instead of having to, key in stuff off of your data sheet or cable up your device and convert it from this format to that format, get it into Excel, and then try to shove it into here and in this database. And people were so used to spending all of this time that when you removed that at the start of their field effort and at the end of their field effort by just saying, hey, you're just synchronizing data. I think a lot of people really, that means they can spend more time in the woods. That means they can focus on data quality instead of just the mechanics of moving data around. That means they can get the answers much quicker because they can get it near real time as soon as those data are uploaded. And so those kinds of things I think really have been very influential in convincing people that this approach to new technology is worth it. It makes people's lives easier, especially the parts they don't like. A lot of foresters, they want to be out in the woods, actually collecting the data and observing and managing actively. They don't want to be sitting in front of a computer keying stuff in or, wrestling between file formats. So just making all of that easy, I think has been sort of the biggest thing that's helped the adoption of our system.
Yeah,
But
for
also,
sure.
state agencies need robust, reliable systems that they can count on. And so, as you mentioned, we've done a lot of work with state agencies. I think we have 11 state agencies now that are using our system, and some of them quite large, with over 100 users. And it's just really important to them to have these very specific processes instead of ad hoc workflows for maintaining, QCing data, getting data into the systems. And so that I think has been another real key part of it, is that we can say, hey, this is the plan. This is how the system works end to end.
Yeah, very, very cool. Was there some moment or like maybe from a technology point of view or some event in the news, I don't know, that you can think back to and go, this was the moment it clicked for the forest community and their understanding of how your technology would transform how they actually go about doing cruising? Or was it just progression, gradual baby steps until momentum was built. Was there something that pops to mind in terms of like, gee, was this happened and boom, the light bulb went off with everyone?
I think I wouldn't say a light bulb going off or a boom, but I do think there are, if you look at sort of the timeline from when we started playing with this technology in about 2012 and where we are today, if you look at that timeline, there are a few events along there that I think are pretty, that are inflection points. And so certainly some of the early ones with some devices, things like the Google Nexus was a big one where you also had this very unaffordable or very affordable, inexpensive device. Now, is it what everybody Forester wanted out in the woods? Absolutely not. It's not a rugged device at all, but it was a very affordable device that had a really nice looking screen. And the Galaxy, Samsung Galaxies were like that too. So there were some things like that. And then there were some that were surprising in their impact. So when Esri came out with their collector product that's now field maps, we had several people approach us and say, hey, looks like this is the end of the road for your mobile map product, right? Because Esri just came out with collector. And so why is somebody gonna, come to you and buy a totally separate solution? And we thought that might be the case. And it was interesting because the exact opposite effect happened. What that did is that helped people in the general forestry community who were comfortable with Esri and using it as a core business system see that using mobile devices, using enterprise GIS, whether it was ArcGIS Server or Portal or ArcGIS Online, which was pretty new to people, was seeing that that was a viable, secure, scalable enterprise system added a lot of street credibility, I think, to what we had been pushing for. And early adopters were fine with using a tablet and syncing their data and understanding about why that was secure, why that was a great efficiency gain, and why that was a safer way than even emailing shape files from a security perspective. But I think when Collector came out and Esri started communicating that at a broader scale to the forestry industry, it really helped people get comfortable with the idea. So instead of us losing business, we saw the opposite. In fact, we would always say, our best clients are ones that have been experimenting with using Collector, because that means they've wrapped their heads around the change from file-based email or FTPing of files and constantly converting things in and out to I could use an enterprise database. I could use web services to communicate. I can use a mobile device, whether I want an expensive ruggedized one or whether I want a consumer grade. This is a viable, real workflow in forestry. And so I think that really, really helped things take off for us and kind of removed a lot of the barriers that people who might have been concerned with that.
Yeah, it almost sounds like it validated some of your early thinking and just cemented that you were well ahead of the curve in terms of what some others were doing. Absolutely. And so as the general manager of technology at Woodland Solutions Group, and we think about cruising and the technology that you've built, what does short term, what gets you excited maybe short term? Is it, being able to talk measurements? Is it slam lidar and measuring in a different way? Is it new airborne technology, or is it more boots on the ground doing different things? But maybe in the next 2 to 5 year time frame, like, is there something you're keeping an eye on, and in terms of how you're gonna shape the mobile map technology and which way it goes?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And certainly I don't have a crystal ball that can say which way do I think the industry will go and which technologies will end up panning out. But I think I'm really encouraged by the openness to new technology that I see. And I think, when we talked about, these barriers that were there in the past and how there were these, critical points in which helped people rethink about the role of technology in the woods, I think that those have had lasting impact. And I think people are across the industry are much more open to thinking about new technology and seeing the excitement that people have around drones. is an interesting one because it's empowering individual people to collect their data on their time frame and seeing the tools that the software industry, especially the remote sensing software industry, is building to make that available, that you could process that. To me, that's a really great sign of a change in the way people in general, but I think the industry is embracing technology. And that's what gets me excited. It's not any particular one. It's more about all of the innovative thinkers, all of the new technology and the price point and the miniaturization of technology and how these things can work together. Um, because, there's need for all of it. I think that's the important thing. We need much better field technology. We need greater efficiencies. We need better models. We need it all. And the barriers to implementing it. I mean, that's what's really come down from a cost perspective on new technology, on devices, the things that we can build, for for standalone printed circuit boards, all of the great, system on a chip systems, Arduino and all these technologies. It's really amazing what you can do now, which you just couldn't do before. And so to me, it's that innovation and the openness that you're seeing as young foresters with more familiarity and comfort in DIY technology enter into the community and are open to this, trying this. That's what's exciting, and seeing the new players that are saying, maybe we could approach this whole inventory thing from a totally different angle. What if we use LiDAR ground-based systems? What if we're using drones? What if we're fusing those things? That's the exciting part. And what we really want to do is just to make sure that we're helping remove the pain points, because there's lots of them. There's still lots of barriers, and each one of these technologies needs people to focus on growth in that area. And so we really see ourselves as an integrator and helping enable. And I think that kind of speaks to the comment that you made about, what I was showing about how we're integrating with laser rangefinders and things, and how if it has a magnetometer, you really can be doing a STEM map using that technology, getting the distance and azimuth, as well as, the tree heights, and just making that easy, because that in and of itself is a great tool, but what people want is the measurements stored in their GIS. So facilitating that communication and connectivity and fusion of data is where that's what gets me excited. How do we bring this stuff together and make it easy enough to use that people will take advantage of it?
Yeah, and thinking of that, you touched on a neat point there of the worker and the generational change. Um, how much do you think that is the drive? Is it the younger workforce driving the change? Is it societal acceptance that we should just be able to do this with our smartphones? But to what extent, thinking of, that we always hear, the shortage in labor and the workforce across, right across the supply chain as we think about, or the business of forestry. But how much do you think is it the young people driving that change in forestry? Because they're, as you know, foresters, as you said, they don't go to school to study forestry so they can sit behind a desk and play with a computer. They want to be out in the bush, maybe not talking to anybody. They're okay with the 14 hours, not talking to anyone. They love it, truthfully. But how much do you think it's that generational push that's the millennials and the Gen Zs or Zs that are driving some of these pushes towards innovation? Or maybe it's not them and it's just the natural. Do you think it's just the natural evolution of an industry modernizing?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's probably a little bit of all of that. I know for me, I've oftentimes been on the bleeding edge of technology, and that's not always a good place to be. I was pretty convinced in the late 90s that LiDAR was, just around the corner and was going to be cost effective and operational. Well, why? Because I was playing with that technology and was saying, hey, lasers can measure trees, from the air. It seems so obvious that, of course, we would be doing this in just a few years. And, here we sit, 25 years later, and people are doing it, and they're doing it operationally, and they're doing it well, but it took some time to get from that theoretical into the operational. And so I think with some of these technologies, it is just that the technology is finally mature enough, and it has been around enough that it's becoming cost effective. And so people who've been skeptically watching it for decades is saying, okay, I'm seeing this pan out. I'm seeing other people are finding this a cost-effective way to do this. We better give it a try too. And now, if you give it a try today, some of these newer technologies like airborne lidar, you find that there's great tools and workflows and results you can get. If you were doing it like when I was trying to do that, um, it was painful, and you had to write your own tools. And so for me, a lot of it is that things like remote sensing have finally caught up with the promise that they were making 20 or 30 years ago. And so the barriers have been removed, and so it's finally becoming something people can cost effectively use, and it fits in their models. Having a bunch of younger people in the workforce that are open to technology and innovation certainly helps. It removes that barrier, but it really wouldn't be happening if those technologies weren't already ready for the marketplace and have been tested and matured over time.
Yeah,
That's
what
my perspective on it.
you don't like the hundreds of DVDs with LiDAR data on text files that's in the corner. I know it's in the corner of your home office collecting dust there. You don't want to pull those out and manually load them into a DVD drive to then figure out where you're gonna actually put
No,
it on which hard drive. No, not done
no,
with those days. Yeah, I hear you on that one. So
yeah.
so looking forward, what is a 2050 in 20 the year 2050? What does a forester look like to you? So I'm going to stretch your thinking as GM technology and say, if we go at that 10-year mark and beyond, what are you keeping an eye on as a digital forester and maybe dreaming that we all evolve or progress to? Is there what does a digital forester in the year 2050 look like to you?
Well, I think what I hope it looks like is that the technology kind of gets out of the way and we spend less time talking about it because it really has become enough of a seamless part of what we're doing that we can focus on what most people love about it, which is the knowledge that they have about forests, about forest health, about all the challenges that we have in managing things like, the wildland urban interface and thinking about carbon and thinking about forest health for the long term and sustainability. That's what I hope. And that the technology isn't even as much of a topic because we've got it good enough that it's doing its job. It's facilitating the decision making, it's facilitating the knowledge and understanding. And so far, we haven't really been able to do that. We're still developing that technology to still, really basically just describe the physical structure. And that can help inform decision making, but it doesn't make the decisions. It still just characterizes the physical aspects. And so that's important. And that's obviously an area where I've been focusing my attention, but the technology is not the end game. I love it. I love building it and integrating, but it's really when, and I mentioned this, I guess, earlier, it's the integration piece that's so fun. It's taking these different technologies, but building them into a system that gets out of the way so a forester can get out in the woods and do the work that they care about. So to me, that's the apex. That's where we're trying to get to. We're taking baby steps there and trying to make it easier for foresters to take advantage of all these technologies. And when we're successful, it'd be because they don't need to think about them and they can focus on being a forester, and the technology takes care of the nuts and bolts, the measurements, the models, etc. And yeah, that's my hope. I
Yeah,
don't know if
yeah.
we'll get there.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because there's so many technologies we use on an everyday basis that we don't spend the time trying to understand or explain. The microwave heats my food. Beyond that, basic physics, understand what's happening. But beyond that, I don't really spend much time thinking about it. So that's a great point there, and maybe a fun exercise you and I should do as a competition when we approach a friendly competition when we approach a new prospect or someone interested in technology. We should just flash up one slide deck that shows, hey, this is how you're doing it now, but if you adopt our technology, we can add this many hours to your day back in the bush and see how quickly that converts, right? Versus, well,
Right.
now you drive, what I can add like 6 more hours in the bush and not talk to anybody. Like, hell yeah, sign me up. Doesn't matter how much it costs.
Yeah.
You mentioned a keyword there. So with the time that we have left, we've been going through whizzing by the hour here. You mentioned carbon, and I know again we just saw each other last week at in Coeur d'Alene, and you gave a talk about carbon. Um, what does carbon mean to you? And are there certain patterns or trends that you're seeing with your client base? I know some people on the ESG front not maybe more lukewarm on that buzzword. We've seen cycles with different players, different registries. I'm not sure I'd say boom bust as opposed to maybe volatility in some of the players in the landscape. But when you hear carbon, what's your immediate thought, or where does your head gravitate to in terms of what it means?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in some sense, carbon is new because of, where we are, current state of, climate change. It's new because of politics. It's new because of the monetization around carbon. But in some sense, it's not new. It's really just biomass. And when I was doing my PhD work, it was really focused on forest structure from a wildfire risk perspective. And really what we were doing was looking at carbon, but from a fuels perspective, the carbon that would burn and therefore drive fire behavior. So it's a very old topic, which is how much stuff is out there. It's just now we're trying to quantify that stuff beyond just the merchantable wood within a tree. We're trying to get all of it. But people have been doing that for decades and decades. And so, my focus on it really is to make sure that for whatever your motivation is, if you're trying to better characterize a forest in terms of the biomass or carbon that are out there, that we help you do that. We try to take advantage of the technology. We try to take advantage of best practices so that you understand, what are the constraints in measuring and reporting on carbon, what for whatever your purposes are, whether you're trying to target a particular registry and sell, carbon offsets, or whether you're just trying to understand, how much carbon is stored on the land that you own or manage. I'm focused on that technology piece and the workflows and the protocols and the cruise specs to help make it easier because it is confusing. And, for once again, foresters shouldn't have to know every subtle last bit of the registries and the markets and what's a broker and what's a project developer. I really want them to be able to focus on what they do really well, which is characterize forests out in the woods. And so providing those tools and trying to streamline those processes, coming up with best practices and guidelines is really where I try to focus on it. Remove the barriers to collecting high quality carbon data, regardless of what happens in the short or long term in terms of political decisions, economic decisions, management decisions. Let's make sure that we're doing as foresters the best job that we can do in terms of efficiently and accurately collecting that information. And I think things are going to change a lot in the short term in terms of our understanding about carbon and how to effectively manage carbon, et cetera. But everything we do, best practices as forestry professionals, as forestry technology providers, is just going to help that by providing good information.
For sure, for sure. So as we look to wind down, if we were, as a true digital forester here, and you were to meet young Kerry Halligan before he became Dr. Kerry Halligan, is there a pro tip, a key pro tip or one pro tip that you would want to impart to that young Kerry based on the knowledge and wisdom and life experiences that you have today that you think other young digital foresters would benefit from?
That's a good question. I think the main thing would be to follow your curiosity and don't be scared of the complex stuff. For me in my career, it appeared to everybody else that I was maybe wandering and doing different careers from, boots on the ground, vegetation science at Mount St. Helens to, studying old growth in Oregon for the long-term ecological research team to down in Costa Rica. But in all of it, I was really following the interesting topics in vegetation science, et cetera, which led to pursuing technology as a way to explore those deeper. And for me, it's turned out to be, a very fruitful, interesting career. And so I would probably encourage young Kerry Halligan to do exactly what he did, which is don't try to stick to too straight of a path. Don't assume that you know how this is going to turn out, but stay focused on the things that are the most interesting, the most challenging, and follow that curiosity.
Very good, very good. Well, so for those, based on that, for those who might want to follow up with you based on something they've heard on this podcast, or just to learn more about the mobile map software and the inventory software that Woodland Solutions Group has available, what's the best way for folks to reach you? Is it email, website, LinkedIn? Is there a better way? Better way?
All of those would work. Woodlandsolutionsgroup.com would take you to our website where you could read more about our software, and there's links there to get in touch with us. That's probably the easiest.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, I saw you last week. It was great to have this conversation, although now it's back to virtual, even though we are in person just last week. But it was great to see you last week in person. Great to have this conversation with you. And I'm glad you're able to carve out some time for this guy to share some of your thoughts on where you think technology is going and the changes and the evolution of the digital forester as we go. So thanks so much. And forward to seeing you next time, next go around.
Sounds good, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Enjoying the conversation.